This is a really interesting piece in the Los Angeles Times, rather, by Doyle McManus called "Joe Biden Has Become the Anti-Reagan," and his speech to Congress will make that clear. Now, this was, of course, written before last night's speech, but it was really confirmed by the address Joe Biden gave to a joint session of Congress last night. Joe Biden and his Bidenomics, his economic ideas, as they're being called, are truly based on the opposite principles of Reaganomics. Reaganomics boiled down was supply side economics, sometimes called trickle down. The belief that cutting government spending is good for the economy, cutting taxes, income taxes and capital gains taxes, particularly on the rich, is good for the economy. Reducing regulation on business is good for the economy. Tightening the money supply is good for the economy. And also, Reaganomics includes the idea that giving people help will make them lazy. Joe Biden and Bidenomics, as they've been dubbed, are the exact opposite of Reaganomics. Now, to be really clear, this doesn't have to mean that Biden is ultra left or as left as Bernie or whatever, but his views are truly the opposite of Reaganomics. Reaganomics is supply side economics. Joe Biden is demand side. Stimulate the economy with spending and by increasing demand. Reaganomics is about cutting government spending. They almost think you can cut your way to prosperity. Joe Biden believes you increase government spending on the right things, and that's good for the economy. It creates jobs. It injects money into small business. Reaganomics is cutting income taxes and capital gains, especially for the rich. But Bidenomics is about increasing them on the people most able to pay, since we know that the hoarding of money by those people is not economically stimulative compared to well thought out, properly targeted government programs. Reaganomics wants to reduce regulation on business and let it rip. Let them do whatever the hell they want. Joe Biden recognizes we must regulate in order to prevent the further destruction of our environment, which long term would be terrible for the world and, of course, terrible for the American economy. Reaganomics wants to cut the money supply. Often they want higher federal funds rates. Bidenomics is about increasing the money supply through thoughtful stimulus spending. While Reaganomics would have you believe that if you give people help, it makes them lazy, the Biden idea is that if you give people help, you make it so that they're not constantly treading water trying to avoid drowning. They will become more innovative. They will be more predisposed to become more productive members of society. Notice that nothing about the Biden view is remotely socialist. It's almost really just Keynesianism. It's a different form of capitalism. Some people don't like that. Some people didn't like the FDR New Deal because they were well to the left. Socialists wouldn't really have liked the New Deal because it did a lot to sort of cement industry in the American economy. It's similar with Biden. There's nothing socialist about this. And as Doyle McManus writes in the LA Times piece, Reagan made people hate government and then debate whether government should do anything at all because the default is government is bad. Joe Biden's approach is government doing things can be popular if they are done correctly, if they are the right things to begin with. Vaccine distribution, COVID stimulus are two great starting points because they're so popular, even with many Republicans. That could then build goodwill towards the proposals like what Joe Biden outlined at last night's speech. This is very different than what we saw after Reagan, which was the demonization of government, the constant drumbeat about cut programs, cut social programs. And we could be entering a new era. Now, I don't say that hyperbolically. It's just, there are eras. Eventually, eras change. We could be shifting to government being seen as a tool to help people if the tool is used correctly. Even Republicans, we have to admit, under Trump, sort of drifted away from as much demonization of government. You still saw it, of course, but they've drifted away from it a little bit. And part of it is that while the Republican Party is busy fighting this culture war, they've completely abandoned, I punched my mic. They've completely abandoned policy. If the options are government doing stuff under Biden or nothing happens either way, while Republicans just talk about the culture war and Dr. Seuss, government doing things starts to look quite good. And that's part of why we see a strong support among Republicans comparatively for Joe Biden on vaccination, as well as Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID stimulus. So we are going to follow this very closely. But the antithesis of Reaganomics appears to be what Joe Biden is rolling out as economic policy.